Hello, my name is Ilona, and in this video I want to tackle a very difficult subject. It's about healing the inner child. But to heal your inner child, you will have to take a look at the role of your parents or the parental figures in your life, and that can be very difficult. If you were born and raised in a very loving family, then really you probably don't have an issue. You really are surrounded by loving people that have been supporting you. You know how to support yourself. You're very loving towards yourself because that's what was implemented in you when you were raised and growing up. Most of us were raised in dysfunctional families, and of course you have all kinds of scale in how dysfunctional a family is. But it's very important to understand that there are all kinds of levels of abuse, neglect, and it's very important to understand that. It isn't about blaming your parents, like, well, it's all their fault, so I don't have to do anything anymore and I'm a victim. No, that's not what this is about. It's about looking at the pattern so you can face the truth. You're a mature adult, then it's your responsibility to take care of that inner child. And when that inner child is still affected or hurt by what happened in the youth or happened in growing up, it is now your responsibility to take care of that. I've learned that the hard way, and it's not easy because a long time I really blamed my parents for everything and my family for being the way they are and didn't bring me anything. Because really it puts you in a victim mode. You're not going to get out of that. And right now I'm the adult. I have to take care of my inner child. That's up to me. But you have to look truthfully about what happened. Growing up, you have to look at the role of your father, the role of your mother. My parents luckily have changed a lot. So they're not the same people as they were when I was growing up. I still have to face the pain from the youth that I was brought up in, but that's something I have to deal with, and I do everything now energetically to deal with them, to deal with the pain and the anger I feel towards them, because I wanted, every child has a right of a supportive parents. They have the right to be emotionally supported, which was very important to me and I didn't get as a child. So that's now something I have to do and give myself the emotional support. But I have to stand up for my inner child and face the anger, the pain, the sadness from that period of time and look at my parents like, yeah, they were not capable of giving me anything more. They were not capable of doing anything more at that time. And I separate them from who they are now. I'm sure there are people out there that are still facing their parents that haven't changed. Well, in that case, you will have to, of course, deal with this energetically. I will get into it later on in this video. And then decide what you want to do with your parents now. Just because they are your parents doesn't give them the right to control your life, decide for you, not support you, be toxic towards you, all kinds of things that are negative towards you. If they're still acting like that right now in your life, then you have the right to step back and let them go. That's very important to understand, that we do have this moral of, well, you have to stand behind your parents, you have to be grateful, they've given you life. It's almost like you need to be grateful for everything, even though sometimes there are horrible people. They haven't given you anything. They pretty much just given their own toxic patterns and just passed it on to you. So it's very important to understand and differentiate in that yes, even though they're family, even though they're your parents, you do not owe them anything at all. That's very important to understand. Sometimes it may seem very hard. I appreciate my parents now. Like I've said, they've changed. So I have a very good relationship, especially with my mother. I've already talked about that. I'm very happy with that. My father is very closed off emotionally, and I've accepted that. So I don't expect him to act any differently or that I still want something from him. I'm going to give that emotional support to myself. I'm not dependent on them for that anymore. And that's very important. Now, if you can get yourself to a stage where you feel fine, where you can keep your vibrations as high as possible, even when you're around them, even when they're exhibiting toxic behavior, then, you know, that's fine. That is your, you know, how do you say that? That is up to you to decide what you're going to do in that situation or not. That's completely up to you. Like I've said, in my case, there isn't any toxic thing going on there. I'm still clearing up things, and the more I clear up, the better I feel, and actually the better the relationship is with my parents. So, like I said, we need to deal with that in different ways. But I want to mention someone a lot of books I've read from her. Her name is called Alice Miller. And I have a few books, of course, these are with Dutch titles. Well, I am Dutch. One of the most important one is the, I believe, what's it called in English? The Drama of the Gifted Child. You have to know Alice Miller was born in 1923. She died in 2010. She's a psychoanalyst, and psychoanalyst, I believe, yes. And she's done a lot of work on child abuse, and especially people keeping quiet about that. Well, she was brought up obviously in a very difficult period. She lived in Poland till 1931, then she moved to Berlin. She's from a Jewish background. Of course, the rise of a certain party in that period. They moved back to Poland. She managed to escape a certain area, and that time they were all locked up in a certain area, and she managed to escape there, lived under another name. So she really dealt with very difficult experiences at that time, and she really is very straight to the point. She sometimes can be a bit almost rude, so to speak, when she writes things. I appreciate that. I like the directness. And she really brings up also this fourth commandment, especially the religion, that you have to honor your father and your mother, and how devastating that is, especially when you're dealing with dysfunctional parents. A lot of people, and I still notice it in personal readings, want to protect their parents. So in their mind, everything was fine. I was never hurt. I got food, clothing. They were there, you know, going on holidays with them. But when you really start talking to them, you notice their father wasn't there because he was always working. Their mother was depressed or other things happening. So the child was neglected. That is emotional neglect. If you don't get any support, emotional support, if your parents do not teach you how to deal with emotions, talk about your emotions, validate your emotions, because that's so important that parents validate your emotions, that what you're feeling is all right to feel, and how to deal with anger, how to deal with sadness. Most people have no idea how to deal with that and are not teaching their children how to deal with that. So it's very important to understand that that has an effect on a child. They push away this feeling, they push away all these forbidden emotions apparently, because their parents don't want to handle things with that or don't want to look at that. And then you get what she says in the Drama of the Gifted Child, that children will create a false self just to keep standing, survive, because you're dependent on your parents as a child. It's very important to understand. So you create all these coping mechanisms. I already talked about that in another video, but especially as children, you will see the relationship between your parents as well. That's love, apparently, because, well, your parents love each other, married and got you, maybe not married, it depends on, of course, the situation, but they got together and that's supposed to be love. So that's what you think as love. So later on, especially if you're not aware of that toxic, sometimes even codependent relationship that your parents may have, you will start searching for a partner that will, you can see as your mother or even as your father. You pretty much are experiencing the same relationship over and over again, trying to fix it. Because deep down inside, that inner child that you carry with you wants love from their parents. They want that unconditional love. They want to be validated. They want to be recognized. And they searching it everywhere. They want validations. And if they haven't, when they're raised or they did not get that from their parents. They'll keep searching for it in the same places, unfortunately, because that's the energy they carry with them. Most of the time, you usually have people or lashing out, so later on they get like the black sheep of the family, they won't listen to anything, they're in trouble all the time. It's usually a sign something's wrong in the family. To me, when there's a black sheep in the family and the rest of the family are like, no, we're fine, we're perfectly fine, we don't understand why that person is acting this way, usually mean there is something wrong in the family. But the black sheep is the one that is living this energy, showing that there is something wrong. And then, of course, you have the people that put everything inside. It's almost like the implosion. So they maybe even get sick, they maybe even get pains, or just something that really punishes themselves. So you have certain youth grow up, teenagers that will start reacting to the outside world. And then you, of course, have the teenagers that will turn everything against themselves. It's almost like they're living that internalized parent, like, yeah, you're awful, there's something wrong with you, because usually that's what children are feeling when they're not getting what they really need. They feel there's something wrong with them. And it just depends on how they're going to respond. Are they going to react it out to the outside world, maybe even get aggressive, very defiant, like don't get near me, that attitude. Or they could be like this victim and depressed. And then, of course, you have all shades in between. So people can have both. Personally, I had this pleaser, very want to please people, please like me, please say I'm all right. And I had this rebel, so I could really suddenly be very angry and lash out. So I had both sides, but I'm sure people have all kinds of possibilities, and it depends on how you were raised and what the dysfunction was. So it's very important to understand. I really recommend her books. I also have Thou Shall Not Be Aware. I also have that book, Society's Betrayal of the Child, which is very important. She emphasized, of course, the fourth commandment. I already talked about that a lot of people growing up in religious homes are not even allowed to question their parents or look at their actions like there's something wrong with it. So they cover it up and they were depending on their parents. So it's very natural that a child will have this picture that everything was all right and doesn't want to tarnish it, because it will feel like betrayal to the parents. But if you really want to heal your inner child that was neglected, that was pushed aside, it's important to look at what was really going on and to really look at your parents like, yeah, they were flawed individuals. They had a lot of work that needed to be done. And at that moment in time, they didn't do that on all kinds of circumstances. Most of them weren't even aware. It doesn't matter. Don't cover that up with, well, they didn't know any better. You just have to forgive your parents. You just have to move on. Don't carry around all that hatred. That is a very beautiful thought. And ultimately, if you work through the anger, the sadness, the pain, you will get through to that stage all by yourself. But you need to understand that that child screams for recognition. So you really have to connect with that child and say, you know what, you have every right to be angry. You have every right to be angry with your parents. And yes, they should have done this, and they should have never hurt you in any way. Like spanking. She is very against spanking. So am I. There is nothing that justifies hurting a child. Nothing. There is nothing. If you are still defending that, that means you're stuck in that principle that your parents can do no wrong, because that is wrong at every level. I understand that it's usually generational. They were raised in a certain way, but when you have an adult and a child, that power balance is already off the charge. So by hitting a child, that is just awful to do. There are many other ways you can talk to a child or do other things to make a child understand what the boundaries are. And if you're balanced yourself, you won't need that. I'm sure you've known teachers, at least I have. One teacher had full control over the class, didn't have to raise their voice, didn't have to do anything, and there were always teachers who were like a mess and it was chaotic and they started punishing people and still they couldn't control their class. That's the same thing. It's about your own energy. If you're balanced and stable, your child will react to that. If your child is reacting in another way, please look at your own energy as well and you can put your boundaries without hurting a child. There's no excuse for that. So I just wanted to say that up front because I think that's very important as well. So I just want to say it's important to look at your parents, to look at how you were raised. You can be angry at them. Some parents weren't even there. Some parents died when very young. You can be angry and sad about that as well. I should usually suggest writing letters to your mother and to your father separately. And if there are any other people that are very important, like grandmothers or grandfathers, write a letter to them and just throw everything out there. Like really all your anger, all your sadness, maybe even have to do more letters if that's possible. But don't send them. This is about energetically releasing everything and facing the truth of what has happened to you as a child. That's what this is about. It's not about blaming the parents or starting to talk to them or start to lash out or get angry with them. That's not what this is about. So just write them letters separately. Put everything in there. Burn the letter when you're finished. Maybe you feel like there's more. Well, you can write all the letters you want. Burn them. This is about releasing and taking care of yourself and start supporting yourself. So if you've been neglected emotionally, there wasn't anyone paying attention to what is important to you, then start paying attention to your own feelings. Start doing what you didn't get in your youth. Start understanding the child when you've missed the understanding. If you're still asking for confirmation and validation outside of yourself, start validating yourself. That is what is important. And I don't want to make this video too long. And this is maybe something I will talk about again because it's such a humongous subject. But it's very important if you're still dealing with parents or parental figures who are toxic, like you don't feel right with them, start this energetical process and then see what you want to do with it or not. Maybe it is time to step away from them. Maybe it is time, like, I don't want to be treated like this anymore. Don't cover it up with what they don't know any better. They're elderly. I have to take care of them. That is misplaced loyalty. It is. And I understand this is a bit tough for some people to understand, but you make that choice, whether it's worth it of every time hurting you. If you cannot keep your energy high around them, if they really are breaking you down every time you talk to them, they're acting the victim, they're lashing out, they're all kinds of ways that's affecting you, and it's still affecting you even when you're energetically working on it, then you have to make a decision. What am I going to do? Don't stay somewhere just because of loyalty. Loyalty, you know, is something that is worth giving to someone if they treat you with respect, if they love you, if they care for you. If they don't do that, and there are some parents out there who don't care about their child, who don't love their child, who don't respect them, who are horrible to them in all kinds of ways, just by maybe making passive aggressive remarks. That's the case, then you have to make a decision if you want to continue or not. You don't owe them anything then. You have to understand that. So you have to make a decision. And in my case, I have a pretty good relationship with my parents now. They are not toxic in a way anymore. I can keep my energy high with them, so I don't have that issue to deal with. But I do have other family members that I will have to make decisions. What is best for me? So it's very important. I cannot decide that for you, but I truly suggest doing the energetic work to heal your inner child. And your inner child wants to be validated. It wants to be understood. Maybe you can take a picture from that time, or that's maybe a younger picture when you were 10 years old or 5 years old. Look at that child and talk to the child. The child has a right to be nourished. The child has a right to be supported. It's very important to do that and do that work. And then you can decide what you're going to do if your parents are still alive or not. Or other families, or maybe other toxic behaviors. Because if you start healing that energy, it's very likely that you will start to understand, like, well, I have the same relationship with my partner. I don't want this anymore. Change, and then see what your partner will do. If the partner will change with you or not, then you will have to make decisions as well. But it's so important to really stand for yourself, really heal your energy, because that's what we're doing here in the Great Awakening. And of course, it's up to you what you're going to do. You can also decide to stay in the relationship if it's not a right relationship for you, it doesn't feel right. You have every right to remain in contact with people that are toxic towards you, even if it's family or parents or whatever. That is a choice you make. But understand that every choice has consequences. That's all. I'm just here to make it a bit clear what's going on. But it's truly important that we heal that part of ourselves. I want to leave it at this, and I hope to see you in another video. Bye.